How many of the ladies would like to be like Danai? Wow. You've got a mentorship class there.
That's great. So for our next session, we will have Ronak, who was on the panel earlier, coming to speak to us. I think he's already told us about himself, and we have a great understanding of how he has insights into financing, especially at a pan-African level. So I really encourage you as young people to, even if the space is not an area that you maybe know a lot about, allow yourself to learn. When it comes to question time, ask questions. Don't be shy. Don't go away and wish you had asked a question. So without further ado, I would like to invite Ronak to come onto the stage. Please clap for him as he comes up.
Six p.m., July 24th, 2012. I was walking from the office and looking forward to a game of squash with a friend. I put my car keys in the ignition, and just then, my phone beeped. The president of Ghana, John Atta Mills, was dead. I scanned all my news apps, no official confirmation yet, but Twitter was awash with rumors. I needed to be prepared. How would this affect the country politically? Would there be stability, a smooth transition, or market turmoil? I switched off my car and made my way back to the office. I had to figure this out in real time. From assessing succession politics in Ghana to revolutions in Egypt, elections in Nigeria, and the economic implications of Ebola in West Africa, welcome to the life of a political economist, or corporate sangoma. I often joke and I say that my job is really to try and predict the future, which is pretty tough if you don't have a crystal ball. I've traveled the length and the breadth of Africa, assessing political, economic, operational, and security risks, and basically I try to make sense of what's going on this continent. And truth be told, I really love my job. It's edgy, it's dynamic, it's unpredictable, and I'm constantly wrestling with different opinions, thoughts, and debates. I've seen things that have startled me. I've met with people with so many different points of view, and I've felt things I never thought I'd feel. I've been in a very unique position to experience our continent in a way that not many people will ever get the opportunity to. I've met with heads of states and sat on panels with central bank governors in fancy hotels. I've partied all night in Angolan nightclubs. I've flown on rickety airplanes to places like Ouagadougou. I've dashed through Lagos traffic jams to avoid missing a flight, and I've even been emergency evacuated across the Congo River. It's been an education that you won't find in any textbook. And on this journey, I've been energized and inspired, but also deeply saddened by what I've seen. I've had my highest highs and my lowest lows. And it's this either-or dichotomy which is one of the most confounding aspects of working for and in Africa. You see, Africa is either the hopeless continent or it's Africa rising. It's either a continent of poor governance, political crises, wars, disease, and poverty, or it's a thriving frontier for foreign investment that's bursting with potential. You're either an Afro-optimist or you're an Afro-pessimist. You can either do well for yourself or do good for society. And apparently there's no room for anything in between. But the reality is that Africa is not a single country. It's a continent of 54 countries. There are different political structures, customs, tribes, races, policies, mentalities, ways of doing things. There are cultures, there are subcultures, there are sub-subcultures. We're operating in a vast landscape with unique cultural, geographic, political, and economic factors. And it's a maze out there, from legislation to policy to infrastructure to languages to skill levels. And yet we continue to frame Africa in these either-or terms, from politics to business to the way we engage on social media. And it's a major drawback, and it constrains our ability to develop the necessary solutions we need for our societal challenges. I first came to this realization when I went to Rwanda. Rwanda had been touted as the Singapore of Africa, a new model for development. Now, I'll be honest, when I went there, I was very skeptical. But Rwanda did my head in. I landed at the airport, passed through customs immigration with a visa in 5 minutes. There was no litter on the streets. I surfed the net in my taxi on free 4G Wi-Fi on the way from the airport to the hotel. The efficiency was staggering, and you'd be hard-pressed to find this level of efficiency anywhere else in the world. This was not the Rwanda that I was expecting. Now, before you go thinking this was just window dressing, it was just cosmetic, the country had also made incredible and undeniable progress in poverty reduction, in improving healthcare, access to education and water. Basically, all key aspects of human development. Now, I had read all the stats, but I was now seeing it with my own eyes. Rwanda bore no resemblance to a country that had experienced one of the most bloody and brutal genocides in history just 2 decades before. But I still didn't get it. The Rwandan model of democracy simply didn't fit into the way that I had been taught to view the world. It didn't fit the textbook models of good governance. You see, good governance had a right way and a wrong way, and this was simply too unconventional and too unorthodox for me to fully comprehend or digest. It was a pseudo-democracy. Civil liberties were limited. The system was heavily dependent on one key and charismatic leader. Yet, it had the highest female parliamentary representation in the world, and its literacy rates had improved exponentially, and it was achieving job creation. So if politics of the stomach and inclusive growth were the urgent challenges of Africa, was this really so bad? And so I left Rwanda scratching my head. How was I meant to reconcile this dichotomy? Was this Africa rising? And why did it not reconcile with my assumptions? See, I'm not alone in this dilemma. But through my travels, I've had a number of these penny-dropping moments that have fundamentally shifted and shaped the way I've thought about issues in Africa. Like a trip to Botswana, which showed me practically how this winner-takes-all model of capitalism that we'd been taught to celebrate is a deeply outdated model of financial success. In all my years of finance, I'd been taught that capitalism is right and socialism is wrong. But Botswana, the world's leading diamond producer, flipped this entire notion on its head, and they showed how there was a better way. Botswana was the first company in the world to provide free antiretroviral therapy to any of its HIV-infected employees. They built schools and they provided healthcare to their employees. They realized that the sustainability and the success of their business depended on a healthy and a happy workforce. They realized that this was not a nice to have, but a business imperative. We like things to be black and white, but life just isn't like that. The nature and the scale of our challenges in Africa requires leaders who are able to deal with shades of gray. Leaders who are willing to wrestle and engage with the limits that we put on how we view the continent. Leaders who seek out different lenses. Leaders who empathize with different points of views. Leaders who question their individual and their collective responsibilities in all of this. But binary thinking seems to be a matter of course, especially in the business world. South African firms especially are guilty of this. We adopt these my way or the highway attitudes when we expand into other countries on the continent. So many companies simply fail to get it. I've seen executives go into board meetings and speak in languages that they know that their hosts won't understand. They talk about how happy they are to be in Africa, as if it's some alien land. But Africa is not some exotic entity. Yes, we have challenges, but the reality is that there's nothing happening on the continent today that we're not experiencing elsewhere. When I describe frequent terror attacks, plunging currencies, regional tensions, and weak economies, you instantly think Africa, when in fact I could be talking about Europe. You see, Africa hinges on a deeper and a more intimate kind of understanding. It's not simply the place where Simba and Mufasa get to hang out. The nuances, the subtleties, the intricacies, that's what matters. And if we want to really see and feel Africa and be part of the next phase of its growth and development, we need to embrace this ambiguity. We need to challenge ourselves to view things through different lenses, to break out of our comfort zones, and to move beyond the simplistic CNN sound bites. There's a lot more at play than the quick knee-jerk reaction to the day's spot news. So tempting as it is, we must resist jumping to overly simplistic or optimistic conclusions about Africa and the direction that it's heading. We need to guard against Africa rising and the hopeful continent headlines, just as in the past it was wrong to dismiss Africa as a basket case and a hopeless continent. We know that this requires rejecting the narrow definitions which have limited the way we've thought about our continent's successes and its failures. But in reality, you can't expect to understand the psyche of a place when you never leave the four walls of your hotel room, when you don't have even the most rudimentary understanding of a country's history, because you haven't even made the effort to. How can you begin to understand what shapes the spirit of the people in a country, never mind consumer preferences? And I can tell you that despite my two left feet, I've learned more about a country's culture on an Angolan dance floor than I have in a corporate boardroom. And I've learned more about the realities of Nigeria's foreign exchange policy from having my beard shaped in a barber shop than I have in official meetings. It's a good beard, right? But it's far easier to say that the place is a mess, that it's corrupt, that it's too difficult a place to do business, than to acknowledge that you didn't do your homework right, or that you failed to understand the market, the culture, and the consumers. Because that's not a narrative that fits nicely and conveniently into the little boxes we create to understand the world and our continent. And therein lies the problem. But all too often we're afraid of that missing middle, because that actually requires us to work more, to think more, and to execute. So imagine if I listened to CNN, who famously described Kenya as a hotbed of terror in 2015. If I reacted with fear and alarm and outsourced my thinking, I would have made a major error in judgment. I would have reacted with hysteria rather than rationality. And I would have lost the opportunity to engage with former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, and I would have missed a great selfie opportunity as well. You see, in each and every situation, there are multiple narratives. Like that day in July 2012, when I was forced to return to the office to make sense of what was happening in Ghana. I had a number of choices I could have made. My stress levels were high, and everywhere I turned, I was overwhelmed by media soundbites that were attempting to update me blow by blow. I could have pieced together an opinion from the news flashes, but the situation required depth and accuracy, nuance. I had to look at the big picture. I had to tap into the views of Ghana's politicians, its army generals, its judges, its civil society, its youth, its intellectuals. If I hadn't done this, my analysis would have been simplistic and it would have been shallow. Ladies and gentlemen, the narratives we hear about Africa do not do the continent justice, and they're preventing us from seeing the light from the shade. So let's embrace that middle ground, the ambiguity. It's this ability to think beyond the binaries and to really think in diverse and daring ways that is going to be the currency of the future. And it's only by breaking down these limitations that we can finally begin to shape and tell authentic and accurate stories about Africa, rather than have them told to us in simple binaries. Thank you. Take questions if there are any. Yeah.
If you had 50,000 US dollars and it was all you had, where would you invest it in Africa and why?
So sector or country?
Country and sector.
Okay, let's start with sector. So I think in the previous panel I alluded to the fact that Africa's got a young population, and the reality is if we don't provide jobs and healthcare for this young population, things like Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab are going to look like a Disney movie in comparison to what they look like today. So education and jobs are the most critical thing, and that's what I would invest in. Schools and universities and hospitals. A social sector, something I call soft infrastructure. So the bridges, the roads, the railways, the trains, all of that stuff is very important because that feeds into your quantity of growth. But your quality of growth talks to how healthy and how happy and how educated your workforce is and whether they're going to be able to be economically productive. So with regards to countries, I mean, I guess if I was an investor and I had a pot of money, I wouldn't put it all in the same country. So I diversify. And the reason I diversify is because the nature of these economies are very different. So I'd go South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya because of the biggest economies in each of the regions, in East, West, and Southern Africa. And from there, you can service the entire region. So that is obviously premised on political will, sound leadership, lower costs of doing business and making the business environment easier, free movement of people and capital, that kind of thing. But that would be my answer. There's one at the back there. And one of the...
Thank you. My name is Comrade Dostalos. I wanted to ask 2 questions. First, what is your ideological persuasion? Number 1. Number 2, what is, in your own words, the role of organic intellectual thought leadership in the development of Africa's economy? Thank you.
Okay, I'm very, very glad you brought that up because what I've been speaking about is the need to not be ideological. It's the need to be pragmatic. So too often we get seduced by these narratives around, in South Africa, it's radical economic transformation or it's white monopoly capital. It's lazy because we don't think. There are aspects that are good and there are aspects that are bad. And we need to be pragmatic rather than ideological around the solutions we come up with. Because to look at a problem with a blanket approach without understanding what specifically drives that problem in that country, in that context, is lazy. And if you misdiagnose the problem, you're going to come up with the wrong solution. So my view on ideology is, great, but my ideology is pragmatism because I want to get things done and get things fixed. And you need to be able to take people from extremes and bring them together into constructing solutions. The reality is Africa is so far behind the rest of the world that we need exponential growth and exponential solutions. And if we're going to limit ourselves by being ideological, then we're never going to catch up. So that's... So to your second point, and I think I'll link this to a broader theme, thought leadership, all these things, they're great sound bites. But again, execution over innovation. Because we need to make things work. And I think what's quite clear is we need African solutions to African problems. But that's where people like you come in, where you've got bright ideas, you've got the ability to do things and to think beyond traditional methods of financing and doing things. I think that's where you can play a substantial role in developing the solutions and exporting them across the continent. Remember, Africa's power is in the collective. We are a continent of 1 billion people at the moment with a growing population. It's only by working together and bringing this population together that we can exert muscle on a global stage. So I think that's very important, and I think it's very important to have intellectuals and thought leadership and all of that kind of stuff. But what's equally as important, or if not more important, is to not just have thinkers, but to have doers as well. I think there was one more question. I know the time's up, but that gentleman at the back has had his hand up for a while, so let's take that.
Okay. How can African countries consolidate their policies so that they become investor-friendly? And what about their sovereignty? Because the trade relationship with the West is not a friend, is not on a win-win basis, but on a win-lose basis.
Okay, it's a good question because, we can talk about our reliance as a continent on donor aid, on the IMF, on all of these things. But the reality is that we need to also, we can blame a lot of people for our problems. We can blame the West, we can blame the Chinese, all that kind of stuff, but we need to also take accountability and ownership and agency. So to the point about being pragmatic as well, the world is changing. America is looking inwards. The UK is looking inwards. Those have been traditional funders of donor aid towards Africa. Now what Africa needs to do is think smart and box clever. We need to look east. India is interested in Africa. China is interested in Africa. Japan's interested in Africa. Your non-traditional partners are there. And what do we have? You look at a country like Japan, they've got infrastructure know-how, they've got money, but they don't have growth. Africa offers growth, it offers the need to develop infrastructure, those kind of things. So we need to think in practical terms about how are we going to market ourselves, how are we going to play economic diplomacy well in a non-ideological way, but a more practical way, because there is appetite towards Africa, we need to leverage it properly. And the reality is the world's going to go on if we continue to think of ourselves as victims. Yes, there are unequal playing fields in a lot of ways. Yes, global trade is quite unfair in a lot of ways, but you adapt or we're in big trouble. So I think the need to move from talking to solutions mode, very, very important. And I think do I have time for one more question? No. We can chat offline. Cool, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ronak, for a very insightful talk. If nothing else, you've shown us that being in finance doesn't mean that you should not have a full view of Africa, the challenges, and fully understand how we can impact the continent. Our upcoming panel is very exciting, as have been all the other panels. It's on digital proliferation. We're looking specifically at the digital space within Africa. And our panelists for this panel, we have Crispin Chisho, who is the COO for Zimbabwe Online. Please clap for him as he comes up. We also have Shepherd Mutiwa Gota. He is UNICEF Innovations Consultant and is also the co-founder of Wild Tech Solutions. Let's also give him a hand. We have Vimbai Gwata. She is the operations manager for Muzinda Hub, the largest tech hub in Zimbabwe. And from South Africa, we have Tato Mabadusha. She is with Discovery Vitality, and she's the chief of staff to the CEO. Please give her a round of applause. Our moderator for this panel is a dynamic young man, Prince. You know, I've really seen him grow into a mature young man. He's a Rhodes Scholar, studying at Oxford University, doing a doctorate in computer science. And not only is he moderating this panel, but I think he's bringing in his own insight and experience as a young person who's worked in the digital space. So let's call on our moderator for this panel, Prince Abudu.
Hello, guys. Welcome to this session, digital proliferation. It actually takes some effort to say the word proliferation, but we're going to all learn about what it is, and I'm so excited to be the moderator for this session. We have some wonderful panelists with us today. We have Crispin, we have Tato, we have Imbai, and Shepherd. So when you think about digital proliferation, it's mostly looking at to how the rate of adoption of things like internet, things like connectivity, things like IoT, which is Internet of Things, which many of you may not know what exactly IoT is, but after this session, you have some closure as to what those things actually are and what those things mean, the social media you use, what encourages those platforms, the content. So we're trying to debug all those seemingly myths in this session. But without taking much time, what I really like us to do is to make this panel the most dynamic and have you guys ask as much questions as you want, because we know that technology is very important in terms of innovation and driving economies. So we'll start with introductions. And I'm not going to introduce the panelists, but I'll let them introduce themselves, tell us what they have been doing, and why they are here. So over to you, Shepard.
Thanks very much, Prince. So just to put it out there, since planning of this session and then execution, my role with UNICEF has changed. So I'm no longer a consultant, but I'm now with UNICEF full-time. And just to describe my journey, I was declared an engineer, I think some 10 or so years ago, and I worked full-time for about a year. But then I realized that there was a market and a need for health facilities or health institutions, things like pharmacies, to move away from paper-based systems, so capturing records on paper and administering drugs and putting the records on paper, to moving to digital platforms. So we formed 2 companies that are installing, setting up, and putting health facilities onto these digital platforms. And that those 2 institutions have now grown. We've got representation in Zambia, and we also have in Norway as well. And then through doing that, I started consulting for UNICEF as well. And it was sort of the same challenges. Whereas in UNICEF, we were basing our planning or execution on collecting data the manual way. So we design questionnaires, extension workers like village youth workers would go into the field, collect data, and by the time we had the results, maybe the cycle would be 6 months. And then the time we want to execute, it was too late. So within UNICEF and under the UNICEF Innovations sections, we're looking at how do we get data in real time and be able to execute and see the results also in real time. So that's what I do at UNICEF.
Oh, thank you. Powerful work. You know, with UNICEF and the work that they're doing to impact children's lives, it's very large scale, and we're going to learn more about that in the coming time. Over to you, Wimbai.
Morning, everybody. I am what I call a self-confessed digital enthusiast. My role in tech started back at university many, many moons ago. It all transpired because I realized I was not going to become an accountant. And the next thing I was interested in was information systems. Since then, I've worked for the likes of PricewaterhouseCoopers Zimbabwe, KPMG South Africa, within the IT consulting and tech space. I've also done some work in nonprofits within the youth development space. So currently with my role as operations manager at Muzinda Hub, I'm kind of marrying my 2 passions together, which is technology and youth development. And that's pretty much it at the moment.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. We'll go to you, Tato.
Hi, everyone. Warm greetings from South Africa. My name is Tato, and my journey in technology actually started in university. I went to University of Cape Town, and while I was there, I did quite a few internships globally and in South Africa. I worked in Washington, D.C., then in Italy. After leaving university, I joined a consulting company called McKinsey & Company, where I was poached by the digital practice, and so therefore I'm an accidental techie. Since then, I've spent a lot of time working on a variety of projects across different geographies. I worked in Singapore, in Australia, in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Turkey, in Spain, and in South Africa. My new role, I recently joined Discovery Vitality, and as some of you may know, Discovery is one of the largest healthcare companies in Africa, and so I joined them because of the incredible work they're doing in technology, which I'll share about a bit later, and the incredible impact they're having on the South African economy. And like Wimbai, I'm marrying 2 of my passions, which are healthcare and technology and behavioral economics.
Great. Thank you so much. Over to you, Crispin.
Hello. Morning, everybody. My history, can you hear me? My history starts from so many years ago, but I've been an engineer since college. I've been involved in telecommunications since the beginning of time. So we started deploying what we used, the first mobile data network in Zimbabwe, in Econet. that was running at an amazing speed of 9.6 bits per second, kilobits per second. We then managed to also, I also managed to then get involved in the development of the Edge network that also followed the GPRS. And then I was posted to Nigeria, still with Econet, also to establish mobile data services. And I came back here. I was involved in the setting up of EcoWeb. I'm sure some of you, I don't think many of you here know, but we set up one of the biggest ISPs then that was called EcoWeb. I moved over back to Econet, where we started doing product development under business development section. And we set up the platform to launch the first 3G network in the country. Then I moved across to Lesotho, also to set up 3G network there. And when I came back, we decided that there was need to consolidate our efforts, Econet to focus on mobile data, and Liquid Telecom Zimbabwe to focus on fixed data. And when I came back, we set up what is now known as Soul Zimbabwe, which is the retail arm of Liquid Telecom Zimbabwe. And I'm now the COO there, pushing to you the fibronics and the connectivity that you need. I think that has been my journey.
Oh, great. Thanks so much, Crispin. As you can see, we have a really diverse panel, meaning that we're going to learn a lot, from different perspectives and different angles in terms of digital connectivity, the internet, and all those exciting things that you guys have been doing on your mobile phones and other things like tablets and computers. So we'll start with the first question, and I'll address this to you, Shepard. You talked about work you've done in UNICEF, and we've been reading your bio in the program. Hopefully we have all read it. And you talked about the work with U-Report and accessing data, providing real time, and helping young people learn about their communities. Can you just share a little bit more about that project and why you think it is an important initiative at this time and where it is going to go in the future?
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you very much, Prince. So this week, I think on Thursday, the 20th, a headline in one of the dailies read, 10 million Zimbabweans wallow in poverty. So if you hear that headline, a few questions should come to mind. So who are these 10 million? By the way, 10 million was 72.3% of Zimbabweans. Who are these 10 million? Where are they? And if we measure poverty, poverty has many dimensions. So what sort of poverty are they facing? Is it lack of shelter? Is it lack of health? And if you look at the definition of poverty, so it also does bring in information. So that's connectivity right there. Lack of information can also bring about a measure of poverty. And once we've sort of identified or profiled these 10 million people, the next question then becomes, how can we assist them? Or how can we redirect assistance? And using data, we want to be able to do that as well in real time. And continuously measure and say, if we've identified a certain area and we are directing aid towards this particular issue, which is shelter or hunger, how then can we then say we are doing this and people are receiving, and account as well and say, are they happy with the support that they are receiving? And we want to be able to move away from the traditional means. And this brings us about to U-Report. So U-Report is a technology that is being introduced in UNICEF globally, and it's now in Zimbabwe as well. It's a mobile-based technology. It works on SMS. How it's configured is that it has a very, what we call a short code, a number, which is free to the user. So to send and receive SMSs to this number would be free. You could also join using social media platforms. So if you go and look for @U-Report-Zim, send a direct message that says join, it will actually allow you to join that platform. If you go to the Facebook Messenger, you do the same, it will allow you to join the platform. And as you join the platform, the first thing that we then do is we profile you, probably ask you your year of birth, We would ask you your gender, and we also ask you your location. And this database is, we started this project over a year ago, and to date we have over 58,000 Zimbabweans. And these are majority are mainly young people. So over 70% that are on www.zimbabwe.ureport.in over 70% are under the age of 30. So what is the purpose of this platform? Or how are we using the platform? So we're using it through what I would term 3 components. The first being we want to recruit. So we want to recruit as many young people as possible, as many Zimbabweans as possible, right? And once we have them on this platform, once they have joined this platform, the second pillar is we want to be able to engage. And when we start to engage, like the example that I used before, so say for example we want to understand the issue on poverty. So we want to be able to send questions to all the 10 million people that are being affected by poverty, and in real time ask them, which poverty are you experiencing? How can we help you? And once we get that data, we are able to look at the data in real time and then go on to the third pillar, which is advocacy, and say, we have 58,000 young people on New Report, and we've asked them a question on what should be the legal age, or do you agree with the fact that the legal age or for child marriage is above 18? So we want to be able to get that information, and we want to be able to look at that data and use it for advocacy. Approach parliamentarians, us as the development agents, also use the data to, for example, identify hotspots. So if it's an issue to do with hunger, we quickly are able to say, of the 10 million, majority are in this area. And how can we quickly help them? So in a nutshell, that becomes the U report. And once you're on the U report as well, you also benefit with access to information. So for example, the flooding that happened to Cholocho, you actually get life-saving information because we have profiled you and we know exactly where you are. If we have information that we think is helpful to you continuously, we are sending that information across to you. So that is the U report in a nutshell.
Great, great. Thank you, Shepard, for sharing that. You see that there's a term called where people say knowledge is power, right? And as the youth start accessing more information, that's when they start coming with ideas to solve the problems that are in their solutions. So I think that initiative is really worthwhile. We'll move over to you, Wimbai, to just share to us a bit about training young people on digital skills. So maybe debug what exactly is digital skills, and why is it imperative that we actually train young people in digital skills and position to be globally competent in that space?
Thank you, Prince. At the moment, you would know that the buzzword around digital skills is coding. Everyone's talking about, gaining programming skills, learning to become coders. Everyone wants to become the next Mark Zuckerberg. So that's where Muzinda Hub comes in. We run a training program, our digital skills training program, and the aim of that program is to provide globally competitive digital skills to Zimbabweans. So that's upskilling our young Zimbabweans in Python, in Android mobile application, in these really amazing and very current programming languages that are in demand worldwide. One of the reasons behind this is to ensure that we don't get left behind. There's no reason that Zimbabweans should be left behind in this current of technology that we're going through. Another reason is also just around youth empowerment. Not only are we upskilling young Zimbabweans to just to improve their employment chances, but we're also hoping that we get some very young and dynamic entrepreneurs out of this. These are young Zimbabweans who are going to see solutions to issues that are very current within our space. Seeing gaps within the community to say, I can use and apply technology to address it. So that's one of the reasons around there. One of the terms I'm sure you've been hearing over the last few days is African solutions to African problems. And that's exactly what we're trying to do at Muzinda Hub.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, so if you definitely have an interest in learning on digital skills, I think this is the right time and also, a right place to start. And knowing that, digital skills is not only just programming, but it's other avenues that we're going to explore today about how you create content, how you can harness the social media that you own to have a following, have a voice as a young person in different things like social activism and other things that you may have ideas on and want to share with your community. So I'm going to move over to you, Tato, so you can share a bit with us on, some of the, with digital skills and how it has infiltrated the economies and infiltrated the human lives. There's two ways to look at it, right? And one way would be on a macro level, which is an institutional level of how companies and corporations are using digital solutions and innovations to advance their profitability. But another way is also to look at the individual, which is something that will be a little more relevant to this audience. So maybe just share with us your understanding on those two aspects.
Thanks, Prince. I think in general, looking at where we are with technology in Africa today, it's really important to understand how far we've come in both of those aspects. And on the macro level, we've really seen incredible innovation. So in healthcare, in some countries in Africa, like Rwanda and Uganda, in financial services such as M-Pesa and EcoCash here in Zimbabwe, we've seen how the use of technology on a macro level can really change industries and disrupt industries, right? On a more individual level, on a micro level, we've actually seen the use of technology in a big way, particularly on our continent. A few years ago, most of you will remember the Arab Spring. Who remembers that? Where the youth were so disenfranchised and they were so frustrated, they ended up using the individual tools they had in their hands to really drive a message home, to organize and to join together. And yes, it was violent, but what that taught us was the power of technology on a micro level to really drive society and to influence, right? And it also shows us the power of the youth when they leverage technology on a micro level. I do think, though, having said that, and having acknowledged how far we've come as a continent, there is still such a long way to go, and this is where you come into the picture. On an industry level, on a macro level, there's so much governments can still do with data. Imagine if advanced analytics and big data could predict the outbreak of an infectious disease even before it happened. Imagine if we could have predicted Ebola before it broke out because of how we analyzed data and understood analytics of our population. In other ways, imagine if we could use robots and drones to deliver medication to areas that don't have access to infrastructure or roads, or how we were able to deliver nutrition to children in remote areas that actually require that. And again, on a micro level, there's still so much we could do. There's so much around how we as African youth can share ideas around how we solve problems on our continent using social media, using communities, and how we actually start to form these massive teams and massive ecosystems of young people sharing ideas. And so I do think we've come a long way as a continent, and we should be proud of some of the achievements that we've had, but there's definitely a long way to go.
Oh, this is great, powerful. Thanks so much for sharing about, how much we have a long way to go as a continent. But how many of you in this audience have heard the term machine learning? So we have a couple of people in the audience that know this term. And you talked about prediction. And essentially, machine learning is using data and learning from it to make predictions. So imagine if in Africa we can harness that, in agriculture, like you said, using drones to even go and monitor your crop and harvest as a farmer, how much productivity we would have. So we definitely have a long way to go, and thanks for raising that. So I'll go over to you, Crispin. And, I'm particularly excited because you have done extensive work in Zimbabwe in terms of helping us, in terms of connectivity and young people. Can you tell me where Zimbabwe is in terms of, connectivity? Talk about FTTH, which I won't say what it is, and give you the opportunity to explain before I mess it up. And just how much more we have to go, and how, connectivity impacts the economy.
Okay, thanks, Prince. Connectivity excites everyone. I still remember when I configured a Nokia communicator to be able to download email for Mr. Mboweni. He was then the CEO of Econet. And he gave me that device, and I was at Fidelity Life Tower at the copy there. And when I managed to get it to communicate, I drove across to Masasa Park, excited, ran to the CEO's office, and I showed him that you can send and receive email from Yahoo to econet.co.zw. The guy was excited, and I got a promotion. And it's amazing that we still are excited about connectivity today. And this happened so many years ago. And if I look at where we have come from, yes, we have come a long way, but we are still 1 million miles away from where we need to be. Because all that we are talking about, to have systems that can deliver services, to have drones that we can use to deliver services, that we are controlling from the data that we collect, and deciding on the actions that we need to take. We need to have robust infrastructure deployed on the ground. And this is where, and I'm still very happy, because at one stage I used to think maybe networking is not such a good career. Probably development, software development and coding is better. But I still find myself very relevant in establishing the basis of ICT, that is the infrastructure. So if you look at Zimbabwe, you find that, yes, we have deployed fiber to the homes, which is FTTH, fiber to the home. So it's just English. But
Thanks for that.
we engineers like to put acronyms. So we are deploying fiber to the home. We are being accused that we are deploying it only to the niche market, which is a bit unfortunate because, you know, putting physical connectivity to each and every home is a big cost. It's a big capital expenditure for any business. Then comes in the issues of 4G. You know, the likes of Econet, the likes of Net1, Telecel, they are providing 4G. So that is providing connectivity. But when you talk to real systems, you really need solid infrastructure like fiber that needs to drive the systems. The end user, yes, can be reached out with the 4G. So as a nation, we've got 4G in most cities, so that's covered. We've got FTTH in most cities, so that is also covered. But we need more solid connectivity, not just the 4Gs, to the growth centers, because that is the bigger economy. I'm sure you have noticed, and all of us agree, that the economy of Zimbabwe is not driven by Harare, Bulawayo, and Mutare. It is also driven by the farmers, by the growth points that we have got all over the place, where Shepard and his team, they need to reach out to those people. So we need economic activity to be also running from those centers. And we, infrastructure providers like Zoll, Net1, Tel1, we need also to be able to reach out and to make sure that those growth centers are also connected with solid infrastructure that we can use as a basis to develop our ICT solutions. I think that's about it in terms of where we are. If I can just add just one more minute, sorry. In terms of global perspective, we are still miles away. If you look at the global development, you find that the first world are the so-called front runners. They've got solid infrastructure. They've got like gigabit networks that are running across their nations. And they are able to do all these amazing ICT solutions because their infrastructure is established. You've got the Middle East, the Asian countries. They are more like adapters. You know, you've got countries like Malaysia, Indonesia. They are actually making amazing strides in terms of their infrastructure development and their ICT solutions because their governments have taken deliberate policies to actually establish solid infrastructure as a basis of ICT development. We, in Africa, and also part of Asia, we are still starters. The good news is, once you've got the infrastructure developed, to get to where the world is not 1 million miles. The big work needs to be done on establishing the basis, the broadband, solid infrastructure to all the economic activity centers that we need connected. So that's my input.
Oh, great. Yeah, thanks for giving us that glimmer of hope, to say what we need is the infrastructure, and once we have infrastructure, we can quickly catch up to the world in the first world. And hence the term proliferation, right? It's rapid growth that comes once you have that infrastructure set in place. So that's really great work. So I'll go back to you, Shepard. You coined the term the Internet of Good Things. And I know the Internet of Things, which is more just like embedded systems and learning about data and trying to provide real-time information based on what you're observing from your environment. So maybe you can put us to light about what the Internet of Good Things is.
Thank you very much, Prince. So just to build on that example that I used as part of my introduction. So we've agreed access to information can be a measure of poverty. And we've also agreed, I think through the other speakers, that there are obvious socio-economic benefits of being connected. I think one of the statistics from World Bank says for every 10% increase in coverage, broadband coverage, you get about 1.39% growth in GDP. So those are clear indications, and we all agree. So now I need to go back to the 10 million and say, the question is, of course we measure access to information or data connectivity by saying we have covered or we have extended coverage to these particular areas. But maybe let's go to the individual level and say for these 10 million people, like we measure poverty in other forms to say if you live under $1.25 a day, you're poor. Can we not do the same for data and say, if you don't consume 10 megabytes in a day, my friend, you're poor. Because what that allows us to do, I mean, as a build-up to Internet of Good Things, what that allows us to do are a lot of things. And one of them, it doesn't have to be a lose or win situation. One of them, for people like Crisp and Zoe, is it helps them create an appetite for products. For young people, innovators that are in the room, it also helps them with people being techie savvy and demanding for their products. So if we go back to Internet of Good Things, what the UNICEF Global is doing, and at the moment I was just discussing to our colleague from ZO, we are trying to set up partnerships as well to say, for everyone in Zimbabwe who has a device that is able to access the internet, whether they have money or whether they do not have money in their phone, for us to be able to give them that 10 meg a day, we have at that platform. So if you browse to internetofgoodthings.org, you should be able to go onto that platform and access life-saving information, educational information, for free. And that is Internet of Good Things.
Thank you. It looks like we are not doing too bad in terms of innovation as a country. So I'm really excited about that Internet of Good Things. So over to you, Vimbai. Maybe, we've watched a lot of Nigerian movies, and, a lot of content that we're consuming is from other countries. And where is this Hollywood? Is that a thing? So can you just tell us about content and how we are lagging behind in terms of curating our own content as a country?
It's never been more easier to gain access to content, whether it's local content, regional content, or global content, than now. I believe all content falls into three broad categories. Content is either there to inform, it's either there to educate, or it's there to entertain, Whether it's content that we, just to go back to that headline, where we're being informed that 10 million Zimbabweans are living in abject poverty, or whether it's logging onto Facebook Live to see the latest drama between Olinda and Stana. It's all the same content. Zimbabweans at the moment, I have a lot of hope about locally kind of curated content that is happening. There's a lot happening within the creative space. What I'm noticing around our social media channels, predominantly Facebook and Instagram, as well as looking at Twitter, we have to use the opportunity to leverage off these platforms and use our voice. Whether your voice is for activism, whether your voice is to, show us the latest jokes, whether your voice is to show us to share with us books or words of motivation and inspiration. I'm seeing that in the local space a lot. And just to take it back to Mzinda Hub, what we are noticing on a weekly basis, because at Mzinda Hub, not only do we provide training, we also have a consulting business where we build websites and create mobile apps. And we're seeing bigger than ever with the requests that come in on a weekly basis. It could be as simple as, I've launched an ebook, and I just want to create an author website so people just know about what I've written. I've launched a non-profit organization, and I need to collect data by creating a mobile app. More than ever, I think young Zimbabweans are definitely kind of harnessing the platforms out there to create content. I do believe there's a danger in becoming, and this is not just Zimbabweans, this is an African problem, where we just become the consumer of things and not the creators of things. It's not good enough to say, there's Facebook. I don't need to create another Facebook. Who's to say you don't need to create another Facebook? I like the term that you coined just now, Zollywood. When I think about Zimbabwean in the 90s, we used to have a very big kind of Monday night drama. If you think about where Mukadota came, Parafin, Gringo, I know some of you are far too young to even remember those days, but I want to see platforms like YouTube and Facebook, where young people are creating content that speaks to what's happening in the country right now, and create kind of skit-based comedy around that. Yeah.
Oh, powerful. Great. So this is, you see how we have a call of action from Mumbai, but we want to see YouTube channels. We want to see young people creating content in many ways to empower our economy. So I'll just quickly move over to you, Tato. Maybe you can tell us something more, specific to the audience we have. How can all these young people today harness, digital platforms and things like social media to their benefit, especially in the area of trying to make their own innovations, or trying to make their own businesses or their own ventures?
I think that's a great question. And if I have to just take a few steps back, I know most of you are either in school or university or are just starting out. And I've had the fortune of being able to work with some corporates. And so most of my career has been spent in corporate. I'm not a cool entrepreneur yet. I'm still building myself. And so the first point I want to make is just really around taking cognizance of the opportunities you have and not being afraid to go into organizations that are already doing some of the stuff so that you sit at their feet and you learn. Not all of us are going to be entrepreneurs right from the bat, but really exposing yourself to opportunities to learn, to absorb what's going on. I've worked in environments and in banks internationally where they're really rolling out the best of the best technology. Discovery is doing the same thing. And having the chance to just sit at the feet of tech brilliance and people who are already brilliant and are already doing this already gives you access to some of that. The second point I want to make, which is more directly linked to your question around how we use social media as young people, Mumbai made a brilliant point around creating content. And in Africa, we don't have enough of that. And so sometimes content includes television or skits, as you mentioned, or humor or comedy. But sometimes content also includes idea generation. Content also includes, the things that you are learning, how you're making sure that you're proliferating that to your peers and what you're sharing. Your social media profiles are, yes, to exhibit how much fun you had last night or, the exotic destinations you're traveling to. But more importantly, how are we exposing, those of us who've had a chance, exposing other young people to the things that we've learned and experienced? Because in that one moment, you can become a professor. You can become an educator. You can become a fellow peer-to-peer teacher for your experiences, and therefore we're passing it on. We're paying it forward in a way that no other generation has had the opportunity to do.
Wow, that is fantastic. So we can definitely harness, these platforms for, something useful and following our passions, following our hobbies, and things like advertising your own initiatives. So before we move on to Q&A, because we know that we are running out of time, I would like to move to you, Crispin, to just talk to us a bit more about, what ZO is providing and what are some of the initiatives that have already started in terms of infrastructure? Because I know that you have said a lot about that. So maybe just take a few minutes to excite us about what we can, anticipate in the next few years as a country and how we can catch up to the world.
Okay, thanks, Prince. I'm actually very happy that we now have got what we call Zollywood, because that is from Seoul. It's actually hosted at Seoul. Right, so once you've got any movie, any content that you want, you can actually go to Seoul and get it hosted on Zollywood. Okay, so what you can look forward to from Zoll is basically reliable connectivity and infrastructure that you can use for the development of your ideas and solutions. What I wanted to highlight, though, is you find that when a country or an economy is growing, especially if the growth is driven by ICT, you start at the infrastructure level, right? Which we said and we agreed that we need to get that established across the nation. Then from there, you find that you need to then have world-class data centers or reliable data centers. Because not all of us, especially the youth, can actually have servers, for example, or platforms that they can actually put their code, their solutions, their ideas to be hosted there at their own offices, because these things cost a lot. You then need issues of power, reliable power, to keep you online all the time, versus ZESA that might be having its own troubles with our economy and so on. So you need data centers that are world-class and reliable. Then on top of that, once you have got solid data centers and platforms, you then need to have cloud services that you need so that the innovators can actually have their solutions hosted and interacting with at global scale. Then from there, you then find that you start needing or having access to the big data now. That is where you're now beginning to have those concepts working, because now you can collect information from the 10 million subscribers. Oh, sorry, I'm from Zo, I'll talk about subscribers. 10 million people that need to be communicated to. So you now, you are checking for what is your name, what is your age, what do you do, why are you hungry, what happened to your father, your grandfather, what is your genealogy, that's big data now. And that is riding on top of your cloud services. And at the end of the day, you then have got what? Your IoT, right, that is running at the top. So these are the drivers of ICT-driven economic development. And we as Zo, we find ourselves playing a very critical role in terms of establishing that, because number one, we will give you a solid link to your home. So once you've got a Zo link, you know you are connected 100% of the time. Unless if there's a big issue where maybe City Council has dug a road and they've broken your fiber, for example. If you are not in a fiber area, you can get a wireless connectivity, which is driven by WiMAX. You can also even have, from our sister companies like Econet, you can have your 3G or 4G connectivity. That enables you to connect to a platform like at our Zoll data center, where we host you, you can have your virtual machine running there, you can install whatever software that is there, and you can develop your solutions. So that gives you connectivity now to the next level, which we are saying is the cloud service. And the other thing that I just wanted to also mention that we give you is, we've got what we call Crash Plan. Crash Plan is a backup service. It backs up each and every version of your file. It's different from Google Drive, for example. Google Drive, if you save a file called test today, you edit test tomorrow, and you save it, it will go and override your yesterday's version on Google Drive. Our Crash Plan will keep the version. If you, for some reason, you need yesterday's version, you still get it from our Crash Plan. And our data center is synchronized from Harare. We've got a data center in Joburg. We've got a data center in Kenya, because we are also riding on the liquid infrastructure that is connecting from Cape, and we're going towards Cairo. So Zoe gives you all these opportunities of having proper connectivity and also hosted platforms from which you can actually start your innovation and development. And Muzinda is our partner. They are hosted at Zoe, so they can testify actually how good Zoe is.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for sharing, about these infrastructures. So these are things that we should, look out for as youth, opportunities to not only grow ourselves, but also know where the country is going in terms of innovation. And I'll just allow time for 1 or 2 questions, which we'll try to answer in the next 2 minutes so that we can finish this panel. Yes.
Oh, hi. So I just wanted to ask you guys if you see any problem with how young people are using social media in the media space, and if there are any problems that need to be addressed, how can we address them?
Problems on how young people are using social media, and if there are any problems, what can we do about that? Maybe we can try to answer that in a minute or so. Yeah.
Can I try that before you guys come in? I'm not going to directly address your social media abuse, but what I'm going to try and explain is and encourage also the youth is, when you have got connectivity, it's supposed to get you connected to the world, right? So once you get exposed to the world, you have got so much wealth of information that you can access, right? Once that is there, I would like to encourage each and every one of us to be able to utilize that information and also to generate our own content that the world over can actually learn from us. The big issue is that you find that we tend to want connectivity, and then we just want to consume, and at the end of the day, you also find yourself abusing it because you are not utilizing anything that is useful. My big point that I wanted to just drive at is you find our connectivity is coming as symmetric. It's no longer asymmetric. So when it's symmetric, it allows you to have high speed that you are able to utilize when you upload your content. So develop content, and let's expose our content that is useful to the world. Let's not just be socialites.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, powerful. So we have Bimbai quickly respond to that, and then we'll take one more question. Then we'll...
I think one of the biggest things that young people kind of utilizing or abusing social media platforms need to realize is that the internet never forgets, okay? So whatever you're putting up, you must realize that prospective employers are now using social media to gauge whether somebody is a good fit with their company. So if you're up there whining about something or putting inappropriate content, they will find it, Also, just remember that, your ancestors could be using this, 250 years from now. Somebody could be like, my great-great-grandfather, and, find you putting up some interesting things. And more than anything else, I always say, when I use social media, I always say, worst case scenario, my mother finds this. Am I able to defend this content? So always put up something that that if somebody came up to you and asked you why, even if your profile's on private, privacy is subjective online. So just don't think because your accounts are locked that no one can actually find information on you. Yeah. So use it as a platform of empowerment, use it as a positive platform, and just remember, we're always watching. Everyone's watching.
Great. Thanks so much, Rimbai. We'll get one question from the students from St. Dominic's. Then we'll try to respond to that question, and then we'll wrap up this panel.
Hi, my name is Chisha Miso, and my question is directed to Shepard. He had mentioned something about how the increase in data connectivity will also impact on the GDP of a country. So I wanted to understand the link between data connectivity and the GDP of a country. Thank you.
Link between data connectivity and the country's GDP.
And the GDP. That's a very tall one for me. But just looking at it in terms of economic activity. So what are we saying, especially if we are sitting at this particular conference or working through this particular conference? We're saying if as young people, we have access to information, we're able to use that information meaningfully to develop ourselves, develop our careers, pick the right careers. In the long run, it benefits us as well because one, we are employable, we are earning, and we are creating even job opportunities for other people. And so as a country, the amount of money or the amount of revenue that circulates within ICT increases, and it becomes a bigger fraction of our gross domestic product, GDP.
Thank you so much. I'll have Tato just give us some take-homes from this discussion.
Okay. I remember when I was a child and I would watch these movies about robots and holograms and very, very futuristic. And I always thought to myself that what if we one day could get there? What if one day we could use technology to actually help change the world and solve the problems of Africa? Technology is not a means to it's not the end in itself, it's a means to an end. And so I implore you all, in whatever discipline you're going into, whether you're going back to school or you're going back to your communities or you're going back to your social enterprises, to really ask yourself, with this phone that I have in my hand, I don't have my phone, what is it that I can do and how can I use this to change my country, my community, and my continent?
Thank you. Can you give a hand? Powerful. So I'll just wrap up with, I honestly do not think I have anything to add, and I hope that you guys have learned a lot of things pertaining to this session in terms of connectivity and how you can use social media and the infrastructure development and how that contributes to the digital economy. And look out for these opportunities for training so that you are not lost and you are in the forefront in this wave of digital innovation and connectivity and proliferation. Thank you.
That was an interesting session. I mean, I was really inspired by the question that was asked by Chisha when I was asking, okay, that's a deep question right there. And I was chatting to him when I'm saying, can you imagine these youngsters actually asking about, okay, give us the link between the GDP and connectivity and so forth and so forth. Well done. I'm really inspired by that. Let's give a hand to our panelists as they leave the stage. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing vast wisdom and knowledge with regards to digital proliferation. Yes. And I'm glad that Wimbai mentioned about, you need to be able to defend the content that you post, because surely indeed, one of the first things that recruiters do when they're about to recruit somebody, they look at what have you been sharing or posting on your social media pages. And that can then see if there's strategic fit or, if you fit into the culture that they're trying to promote in the organization. And just 5 key things that I picked up from this conversation is that as millennials, I think it was also shared that we are heavily reliant on data-driven activities and decision-making to advocate or at least influence in terms of policy making. Because, and if you look at the cost of running a survey, that you can actually then use to say, look, these are the numbers. You can actually do it in real time, cost effectively, right? And that talks also about being cost effective, that talks about efficiencies. And I think Tato highlighted that when she mentioned about Ebola, and to say, you know what, if we were able to predict the impact of Ebola, which again speaks to predictive analytics, I would call it it's a digital donut, if you ask me. And the fifth point being that there are more people today than ever before in history, especially in Africa. If you've heard of a term, youth bulge, there are more young people in the world than before. And this has been declared by the UNFPA, and some would say it's a demographic bomb in Africa, but I choose to say, you know what, I see emerging economies from these, because as you can see the questions that are coming up and the numbers, what they're saying, it only means that it's giving birth to new economies, new ways of doing business. Okay, so let's give a hand again, I think, to the panelists. Let's give them a hand. So after this, make sure that you connect, you collaborate, engage with them, ask them the tough questions. Let it not just end from that deep question. Ask them and see how you're able to plan and execute your ideas. And going forth, so from day one, we've had a number of discussions from entrepreneurship. We've had a number of discussions to her place in the world, talking about the woman of today. We've looked at various aspects. But at the end of it all, you're saying, what is the bottom line here? What are the numbers in terms of finances? At some point, or at every stage, every decision we make has got a financial implication to the things that we're doing. So our next Elevate talk is going to be delivered by the founder and MD of Mantis Africa. He is a renowned financial expert who has teaching and coaching financial literacy in the classroom, and also has hands-on experience in terms of accounting, auditing, setting up business systems in various sectors, so that we can be taught and learn on how we can be financially literate. Help me welcome Mr. Gabriel Chipara. Right. On a lighter note, I got my coaching last night. You can see. Say, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Munyaradzi. Good afternoon, everyone. You guys sound hungry. I thought you had a break earlier on for sandwiches and tea. I'm going to change it. Anyway, it's good to be here. I can see that the bulk of the audience here are youngsters. Raise your hand if you're under 35. Aish. Okay, raise your hand if you are under 30. Aish, okay. I think the bulk of the guys, okay, I won't ask those guys who are over 40 to raise their hands. If you have earned some money in the last 3 to 5 years, raise your hand. Okay? Keep your hand up if you've earned enough money to buy a stand. Okay, there's a few hands that are still up. Those who put your hands down, what have you been doing? Selling maputi. Okay. Why am I asking these questions? If you go to, I think it's Ecclesiastes 10, verse 19, which talks about fists are made for laughter, wine makes merry, and what's the last bit? Money is the answer to everything. So if anyone has told you that money is not necessary, you don't need money, that person does not have money. I'm sure you've heard Phil Yango talking about, hey, filana kurwara, hey, filana AIDS, apa una cash. The point I'm trying to make here is that unless if you have had money in your pocket, unless if you have had more than you can finish in a month, you can't talk about money not being important. You're just trying to cover up for your failure to have money. Having said that, let me take a step back and ask, how many of us have been in a session before we talked about money, before today? And my session? Okay, at least there's enough people who've been in my session before. Financial literacy, sadly, is not being taught in schools. You can see from at the bottom there, where I'm talking about making sure that at some point, and I'm sure that point has to be in the next 2-3 years, this subject is taught in the classrooms by teachers. Not hearing about it once in a year, once in 6 months, when you happen to be in a seminar like this or a conference like this. Why? Imagine if those who raised their hands earlier on had been taught about money in school from age 7. Can you imagine? Imagine if those who are still tenants in their 40s who have earned enough money to be able to buy a house and worse still have paid rent to their landlords, which rent is enough to buy 2 houses. How would they be feeling now? The point I'm making here is that the lack of financial literacy has led to a lot of people dying poor, a lot of people dying tenants. And yet, the money that they've made in their lifetime will have been enough for them to buy 2-3 houses. Therein lies the challenge that most of us face when it comes to not being financially literate. Now, let me address those who are still in school. I met a few St. Dominic's young ladies. I went to Kugina in Shishawasha. And then I asked them, who was born when I was in Upper 6 in 1990? They all laughed at me because obviously they will have to be 27 or thereabout. The point here is that in school, those in lower 6, please raise your hands. Okay, keep your hand up if when you choose or when you chose your A-level subjects, somebody spoke to you about your talents. Keep your hand up if when you are choosing your A-level subject, or subjects rather, somebody spoke to you about the link between choice of subjects and your talents. Oh, you guys are lucky. Why? Because most schools today have A-level subject selection which is not linked to someone's talent. Why is that important? When you link your studies in A-level and varsity to your talent, work ceases to be a chore. Unfortunately for me, I only got to find out about my talents when I was 35. Yeah, that was about 11 years ago, if you're calculating. And after having found out, I'm still glad to say that going forward, I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing here today. Now, let's talk a little bit about the area of financial literacy. It will talk about your life roadmap, your financial roadmap, having financial goals, more importantly, coming up with an income earning model, which says employment is not the only source of income. Who can tell me the other 3 or 4? Okay, I thought you guys are reading. The second one, self-employment. The third one, being a business owner. The fourth one, being an investor. But under business owner, there are lots of things you can do. You can decide to make stuff and sell. You can decide to grow stuff and sell. You can decide to grow stuff, value add, and sell. You can decide to build and sell. You can decide to renovate and sell. Now I'm talking about real estate. So anyone who says to you, the only model of earning money is going to school, getting good grades, going to college, getting a degree, and grafting your back off until you get to 65 and retire, that person belongs to the BBC era, that is born before computers. Why? The retirement you've heard of, the retirement that your parents have talked about, is linked to age. But the new retirement that you should be thinking of, that you should be planning about or planning on, should be linked to money. So money-related retirement is when you say to yourself, what do I need to do for me to get to a stage where I make money when I'm sleeping, number 1. I make money when I'm in Gutu, number 2. I make money when I'm in Cape Town, number 3. But that money is enough to look after my lifestyle expenses however I choose to live. Put simply, imagine if you had 4 or 5 houses by the time you're 45 and you're collecting rental of about $5,000 and all you did in a month is $2,000 to live. It means you don't have to get up to go to work. Now, imagine retiring at 45, guys. 45, you don't have to go to work every day, 8 to 5, and having someone, a mortal human being like you, telling you when to come to the office, what time to go for tea, what time to go for lunch, what time to come back to the office, what time to leave your office going back home. I left work when I was 31, turning 32. That was in 2002. Why? No, 2003. Why? Because I believe I am not employable. Why? When you do not have a life goal, remember I spoke about life goals in the beginning. When you don't have a life goal, someone will hire you to help them fulfill their life goal. So what would you choose? Having your own life goal and be the architect of your own life, or not having any goals at all and be employed by someone who has a life goal and they hire you and pay you what they want to pay you? What would you choose, young ladies? Would you rather work for someone until you get 65? But the question is, what are you doing now to make sure that you decide going forward how you're going to earn your money? Number two, what are you doing today to make a decision later on in life as to when you want to retire? When I look at those guys who are above 36 or above 35, who were born before 1980 or after 1980, or before 1980, when do you want to retire? Number one. Number two, how much money would you like to be earning when you retire? And most importantly, would it be enough to sustain your lifestyle? Now let's talk about lifestyle a little bit. Most people are passengers on a life bus that they're supposed to be driving. I'll say that again. Most people are passengers on a life bus that they are supposed to be driving, meaning they've released control of what's supposed to happen in their lives to someone else, be it their teacher, be it their lecturer, be it their parents, or worse still, your employer, also known as your slave master. Why? Because we are not bold enough to say, hey, this is the lifestyle I want to have. Meaning, you are designing the life you want to have. I'll give an example. There are people who walk into a butchery and they'll just say, can I have some meat? No name. It used to be called ration. And some people walk into a butchery and say, could I have T-bone steak? Could I have fish fillet? Could I have beef fillet? Could I please have salmon steak? What's the difference here? The person who walks into a butchery and names the meat they want, even if it costs them more than somebody who's saying, can I have some meat? It's because they've said, hey, I would like to have a lifestyle where I eat the meat I want, with the name that I want, where I travel when I want to travel. I live in a house with 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, maybe 2 lounges, maybe a 3rd lounge. The sad thing is, if we are not careful and if we let our schooling system miseducate us into not designing the lifestyle you want, any lifestyle will do. Any lifestyle will do. Now let's go a bit further. Remember, we're talking about income earning model. How do we then spend the money when we receive it? Do you spend all of it? Okay, those who have earned some money, raise your hand if you're spending all of your money or you've been spending all of your money. Now the hands are not coming up. Remember the number of hands that came up when I talked about earning money? Okay, raise your hand if you're spending equal to what you're earning or less. Okay, where have those guys gone? Okay, a few hands have come up, isn't it? Why am I talking about this? If you do not tell your money where to go as you earn it, you always wonder where it went. Linked to that, if you are always spending more than you're earning, either you are dipping into savings if they're there in the first place, or you are slowly sliding into debt. Because the only way you spend more than you're earning is either you've got savings or you are borrowing to spend or to sustain a lifestyle that clearly you cannot afford. Now, when you talk of Zim, you've got Timbadzo, loan sharks. I've always asked people, when you decide to go and borrow, you want to borrow $100, interest rate per month is 30%, 40%, 50%. You don't have $100 now, but when the loan shark wants their money back, they want $150. So where is it going to come from if there's $100 today when the loan shark wants $150? Very few people answer that question. And I always ask, where do you get to convince yourself to walk into a loan shark's office to borrow $100 when you can't even afford to pay back $130? The point here is that there is this word called discipline, which is linked to having the discipline to spend less than you earn, or at least, worst case scenario, equal to what you earn. Why? You are not in any financial trouble. Now, when it comes to debt, there are two types of debt. Either it's good debt or it's bad debt. Good debt is when you borrow to make more money. Good debt is when you borrow to create value. Good debt is when you borrow and you are able to pay back the money with interest when the lender wants it back. But bad debt is mostly consumptive. I'll give you an example. You walk into a shop, I won't name the shops, you buy clothes on account. Why? Why would you want to borrow clothing? That's what you're doing. Who do you want to show off to? What is so urgent about having new clothes that you can't wait until the cash is there? I'll tell you why. It's linked to what we call financial insanity, whereby you spend money you don't have to buy things you don't need. And worst of all, you want to impress people that don't even care about you. That's why it's called insanity. You're worrying about what the next person will say when they see you wearing the same jacket Monday to Friday, the same pair of jeans Monday to Friday, maybe the same suit every Sunday, the same color tie, the same color shirt. You know what? No one is taking the register on what you've been wearing the last 2 weeks. So all that thinking is in your head. Nobody's watching you. Now imagine if you said to yourself, I don't care what people think or say when they look at me. Yeah, you're going to look smart, clean at least. But whether you're wearing a VH, a DH, a Paco Rabanne, or Polo, nobody cares. It's all in your head. That's why it's called insanity. And if I'm speaking to someone here, please make a booking with a psychiatrist or psychologist, because you need to address those issues. Why? Nobody is taking the register. Now, when you have the discipline to know the difference between good debt and bad debt, that's the beginning of your road to what is called financial freedom. When you get to a point where you say, hey, why do I need to spend money I don't have? Why? If you don't understand the difference between the two, you get to the end of your life in debt. You leave debt for your kids, your spouse, and your kids' kids. So, for those who have not started earning money, please get this lesson and get it right. Do not be the one who needs to be seen by a psychiatrist. Do not be the one who needs to be seen by a psychiatrist. Now, let's move on. Supposing you have the discipline to spend less than you earn, what do you do with the money? In a country like Zim, where the currency has changed how many times? You know the number of times. We've been billionaires, we've been trillionaires. What was the next figure again after that? Yeah, we've been all that. And we've come back to US dollars. Now there's US dollars in bond notes. If you're in a country like Zim, now you're linking back to your goals, either life goals or financial goals. When you want to spend less than you're earning, you need to save, but not saving for the sake of saving. You must be saving, or at least try to save when you link your goals to your financial goals and you say, hey, I'm saving to pay school fees in third term so that my child goes into class, doesn't get kicked out from day one. I'm saving to deposit for a stand, maybe next year in August. I'm saving to buy a house, maybe by end of December next year. When you have a clearly spelled out goal that's in black and white, even if as a son-in-law, your father-in-law comes and says, hey, Gabriel, could I have $1,000? You say, sorry, Tizara, there's no money. Even if your savings account, which is meant to buy a stand or a house, has $5,000, when you say to someone, I don't have money, what you're saying to them is, I don't have money to give you, but I've got money that's waiting to buy a house for me, or to get a deposit for a stand, or to deposit for a house through a mortgage loan. Linked to that issue, when it comes to saying no, people say, but we're Africans. We have a culture. You can't say, I don't have money with 5 grand in your account when a relative comes and says, hey, I need money to pay for my medical bill. What would you do? Would you take out the $5,000? Or is this part of it and pay over? Or would you say, I don't have money? Yes, I'm an African. But if you're my relative, I'll make sure that I teach you to be organized so that I can help you in an organized way. You can't come to me 2 days before school's open and say, Koma Gabriel, could I have $500 for school fees? I'll say, sorry, my young brother, the money is not there. Why? You are not giving me a chance as your brother to be organized enough to help you. And then someone says, but what if there's a funeral? Someone has died. There's insurance. There's the EcoSure. You pay $1, you get $1,000. So, to those who hide behind so-called African culture, if somebody is close enough to me for me to want to contribute towards their funeral, I'll just have to pay $12 a year to EcoSure, and I'll get $1,000 when they die. As opposed to you coming to me and say, hey, there's no money for the coffin, there's no money for food, there's no money for the bus to go to Muzi. I would rather plan for that expense if you're close enough to me instead of you coming to me 2 days before and say, hey, I need some cash. What am I talking about here? This issue of financial literacy, I remember when we started this program on radio in July 2012, people used to say, but hey, this is American, this is European. There's no place for that talk here in Africa. Why? Because you're Africans. Do we have a currency as Africans? Or did we have a currency before those who brought currencies to us brought them? The answer is no. The point here is we move with the times. We move with what's happening in the world. And more importantly, there's no culture that is static. Culture is dynamic. So if I'm the kind of person who wants to help my relatives, I need to budget for that help. If I have $100 in my emergency fund to help my young brother here, when it's finished, because brother A asked for $80, sister A asked for $20, it's finished. No more. It's okay to say, Andina Mali. It's okay to say, there's no money. It's okay to say, Palibendarama, if you speak Bemba. Why? Most of us are told by those relatives that, hey, if you do not look after us when you come for help, we won't come to your funeral. Don't come. It's okay. If you tell us to phone you first before we come to your house, we won't come to your house. Don't come. We are being blackmailed by our relatives or friends or fellow Africans to be indisciplined when it comes to the way we use our money. I'm not saying let's be stingy. And I'm not saying either, let's be an African. All I'm saying to you is, when it comes to your life goals, when it comes to your financial goals, let those who expect help from you to know where you stand when it comes to the way they want to spend your money. Not a third party dictating to you how you're supposed to spend your money. Now, when you say where do I go with my savings? Where do I go with my investments? In a country like Zimbabwe, you cannot afford to keep your money in what is called cash and cash equivalents. Just keeping your money keeping your money in a savings account when it's doing nothing and earning about 3% per annum. When it's keeping your money maybe in a safe at home. Okay, it could be in US dollars, but what is it doing? All you're doing is preserving that which you have, but it's not growing. When you want to have a synchronized program where you are linking investments and savings, you need to put your money in a house, not physical house, in a vehicle that allows that money to grow. It could be real estate, it could be a business, it could be a second business, a second house, a third house, a fourth house. But please, by God, do not let your money just sit in some account or in some safe deposit box or in a safe at home doing nothing. The beauty about Zim is that, or Africa in general is that, you can make as much as 30, 40% if you're aggressive enough, but the aggressiveness has to be researched, has to be informed. You don't jump into something when you're investing your money without doing the math. To close off, imagine this. In 2030, all African teachers have been taught on how to teach financial education in the classroom from age 7. Imagine every student, when they finish upper 6, when they finish college, they know exactly how they're going to earn their money, whether partly or initially as an employee, you move to self-employed, then a business owner, and maybe an investor, maybe all four combined, because all four ways of making money are not mutually exclusive. They can be done at the same time. Imagine when teachers, instead of theorizing about geography, Hitler, Mussolini, Samori Toure, Cumulonimbus, Cirrus Stratus, and you ask, what is that all? So what is all that information done for me? It has only managed to make you an employee for life. We need, as it says there, to get to a point where every African is financially literate. We need to get to a point where councillors, MPs, senators, ministers, presidents can link what they talk about in cabinet, what they talk about in parliament, what they talk about in the Senate, to the pocket of every citizen of every African country. On those few words, I thank you.
And I think if you have any questions regarding financial literacy, I would like to give this opportunity soon after the conference to have a one-on-one with him, because I didn't know there was such thing as, financial insanity. So that you can then actually get, good advice, and maybe it could be a classroom setting, probably beyond the conference, that you can actually learn more in terms of financial literacy. What do you think about that? That'll be great.
Better still, we can actually organize that. We can come to your school or to your workplace or to your church or to your cell group to talk about money. Because I've noticed that most people are stingy with their information when it comes to their personal financial situation. They would rather have one-on-one or in a certain way they're free to discuss their issues generally. In setups like this, people are just listeners. They don't want to talk about it. But one-on-one in a group setting, we can do it.
Solutions made easy. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Let's give him a hand as he takes his seat. We are almost getting there, and to the grand finale of Innovate, Elevate Youth Conference 2017, the first of its kind, and you guys have been an awesome crowd. So I will call upon a distinguished gentleman who is the Director of Education in High Life Foundation. He's a fully fledged medical doctor who has spearheaded the development of generic antiretroviral medicines for the SADC region. He's adamantly passionate about assisting students from all over Africa to access education through scholarships, improving the quality of education in Africa, through harnessing technology, mentoring the youth, such as yourselves. This distinguished gentleman is Dr. Kennedy Mubayiwa. Let's put our hands together as he comes on stage.
Good afternoon. People are hungry. Let me use that. One and Zara. Okay, so this is the last part of Innovate, Elevate Youth Conference. My role is to bring things to an end. So the process that we're going to go through with is, I just want us to start off by just celebrating the people that have made this conference a success. Do you believe it has been a success? I can't hear you. I can't hear you. You know, I once went and met with Mr. Masiwa, and then he said that if I asked people to come to my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and I said the first person who walks into my office, I'll give them $5 million. He says that people who sleep outside the office. And then he says that, but if I say that I want people to come to my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and the first person to walk into my office, I'll teach them how to make $5 million. He says I'll probably have about 10. So if I were you, having invested Thursday evening, Friday, and Saturday, I'll be walking like this, staggering because of information given to make you make the 5 million. All right? Makes sense. So the first group of people I would like us to thank is everybody who came to this conference as a youth for the Innovate, Elevate conference. Please stand up. Stand up. All the youth, everybody who's here because you came for this conference. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. And just celebrate yourselves. High five people. High five somebody. High five each other. High five, high five, high five. High five, high five. And let me tell you something, Let me tell you something. This is 2017. You have just high-fived somebody that in 2025, you might need to talk to their PA before you can see them. So then you can sit down. The next group of people that I'd like us to really celebrate and thank are the presenters. Some of the presenters are still here, so I'll ask the ones that are still here to stand. We've got lots that have already gone back, but you know what? We are so grateful for the time they've invested. Please stand if you're a presenter and you're still here, so that we just celebrate you. Can we just give them an applause? Awesome, 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 awesome. You know, they took time out of their busy schedules. Some had to fly from all over the world, from America, I'm told, from the UK, from South Africa. You know, we've got people that have really decided that they'll go and invest into you. So as I was sitting down from the day we started, I tried to say, if I was to calculate the amount of money that each hour of each presenter costs, how much has been invested in you? Staggering amount. The next group that I would like us to celebrate is the team that put the Innovate, Elevate conference together. So can the team, if they're around, stand where you are, we wave at you and just thank you for the work you have done. Hey, the team in white, please stand. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That was awesome. An awesome inaugural Innovate, Elevate Youth Conference. I would like us to thank the sponsors for this conference: High Life Foundation, Econet, Zoe, lots of other people that have allowed us to have this conference today. So let's just give an applause of hands for them in appreciation. I would like us to thank Dave Communications. These are the people that have given us this beautiful venue in terms of the decorations, all the screens that we have, the team that's sitting at the back there, the engineering desk there. We just want to celebrate you and thank you. Thank you, thank you. Let's clap for them. I would like us to thank the people that have provided us security. We've had an awesome conference, no incident, because there are people that are taking care of us whilst we're here learning. There are people that have been making sure that during break time, during lunch time, when we walk out, there's always something ready for us to eat. I would like us to thank them for taking care of us. Last but not least, I would like us to thank Celebration Center, Celebration Church for allowing us to make use of their amazing venue for us to have this inaugural Innovate, Elevate Youth Conference. So before I just go into what we need to achieve between now, 2017, and when we meet again in 2018, there's a 2-minute video that I'd just like us to watch so that it just puts all the things together and give you the energy you require to be able to go and execute.
Visualization is right at the heart of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew.
So, here we go. First, an axis for health, life expectancy, from 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth, income per person, $400,000, $4,000, and $40,000. So down here is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubbles show the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe. And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the differences between the countries of the world was wider than ever. United States was in the front, Japan was catching up. Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants
China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence, and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, but there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China, I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa.
And yet, despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner.
Well, what you just seen in the last few minutes is a story of 200 countries shown over 200 years and beyond. It involved plotting of 120,000 numbers. Pretty neat, huh?
So you saw that the blue color of Africa is still lagging behind. I hope you saw that with all the development that has taken place. So for me, that video clip summarizes why the Innovate, Elevate Youth Conference is important, because the future of the continent, the future of Zimbabwe, the future of Burundi, the future of Lesotho, all the people represented here, the future of our countries are sitting in the youth. So what are we going to do next? Here are the next steps for me. Get started. Don't go and put your notes and put them somewhere and say, I'll look at it some other time. Go and get started. You've been innovating, and now you need to elevate. So some of you have been innovating. Go and elevate. Go and work on your plans. Go and execute. Next things that plan to be here next year is an upgrade. So some of you, we want you to come back next year as panelists, as speakers, to showcase that which you'll have achieved between now and the next conference. Go and influence your communities. When you leave this place, go and find people to teach the things you have learned from this place. Don't go and put it underneath somewhere and forget to hand it over to somebody else. Go and teach. The more you teach, the more you remember, the more you implement, the more it becomes part of your new DNA. You need to make sure that you've got clear, implementable activities that you're going to do from today going forward. Don't wait. Don't delay. High Life Foundation, we've got 10 offices in Zimbabwe, one in Lesotho, one in Burundi. With those offices, for those in Zimbabwe, we have got the names of everybody who has participated. We will follow through. We will follow through to see what are you implementing, what is beginning to happen. Because already we believe that you have had 3 days of being mentored. You've got enough information to also be able to mentor. So our managers in the regions will be contacting you so that we make sure that this energy that you have picked from this conference is not lost. We want it to be kept ignited so that you keep moving and keep implementing and keep changing communities. So, we want to make sure that it was not an event. Innovate, Elevate Youth Conference was not an event. It's actually a process. So before I leave, I would like to just tell you a short, quick story. Some of you, so you might need to write some of the bits and pieces down. So it was on the 14th of September 2016, downtown New York, in a restaurant called LPQ on Broad Street. So I'm just saying, maybe write it down because you might want to visit New York and go and find LPQ on Broad Street. So make your imaginations huge, okay? Don't limit your thinking, right? So LPQ, Broad Street in New York. This was September 2016. I'm going to give you just this short story to show you that this Innovate, Elevate Youth Conference has walked the journey that you have been provided, you have been taught in the 3 days. It was an idea. Early in 2016, the thought of putting together a conference was being discussed in corridors, in meetings. But on this particular day, on the 14th of September 2016, Ms. Tanya Masiwa, Dr. Kennedy Mbaiwa, and Monica Tonodzai, we sat in this restaurant and we visualized this conference. We sat and had a 2-hour meeting in that restaurant. What is now amazing to me is that last night I took out the notebook that I used to write out all the things that we were discussing that particular day. And I was ticking how many of those things have actually come alive and we've actually experienced and you have actually enjoyed. Mr. Fayaz King talked about firing people that you start a vision with, right? So I was sitting in the restaurant on the 14th of September. But in the process, as the vision became really serious, I was fired from the vision. And new people took over. And I'm so proud that the success of this Innovate, Elevate Youth Conference has actually been a roadmap, an implementation of how you come from a startup, an idea, to building a vision, to executing, to seeing something coming to fruition and actually experiencing it. So for you to see the architecture or the architect behind this whole work, I would like to finish off by calling onto this stage the person behind this whole conference, Ms. Tanya Masiwa.
Good afternoon to you all. Have you had an amazing conference? That's not very convincing. Have you had an amazing conference? Yay! So I'd like to start off by thanking the amazing committee that supported me in doing this work. And I'd like to name some of them that I can see in the room. Thank you so much, Tungwani, for helping us put this entire thing together and for your wonderful and amazing marketing team. So if you can please give them a hand clap. Thank you so much to Charity Mbofana, who took my calls at midnight, 3 in the morning. I haggled her. I embarrassed her. Thank you so much, Charity, for bringing all of us here today and for just being so patient. So thank you. Please give her a hand clap. Thank you to our accountant. Now, nobody likes accountants. Nobody. When you're trying to have fun with something, they're the ones that tell you to stop. But I'd just like to thank you so much, Chieta. Thank you for pulling resources together for all of us to be able to be here today. And thank you so much for being so committed. I would also like to thank the most patient member of our team who's had to deal with all of you. So thank you so much to Nyasha. She's the one you were all harassing when you couldn't find your tags. Thank you so much, Nyasha, for your hard work and for just being so dedicated. Am I missing any committee members before I get into trouble? I would like to also thank my sister Vambai, who was the event manager for this. She did an incredible job, especially working with our international speakers. And I would definitely like to recognize our ambassadors, who were so helpful in getting all of you here. It's one thing to plan a conference, but when you don't physically know the people that you're planning it for, you need people who are on the ground, who can identify young leaders, who can show us who are the people that we are wanting to invest in. So I'd like to thank our ambassadors. There are 3 of them. There's Munashe Manenji, or I could have said your name wrong. There's Tinashe, but the golden star of our ambassadors, Mr. Moses Machipisa, thank you so much. You know, every time I've been to conferences or listened to speeches at weddings, the thank yous just go on and on and on, and it's just so boring to me. But you know, the Bible teaches us the importance of gratitude. And it's extremely important to always be thankful to the people who've helped you, whether it's big or small, whether it's people who just helped you for a second. You know, there was the story of the 10 lepers. And you can imagine when you've been healed of leprosy and your fingers are still off, but you've still healed, so people don't know whether you're sick or not. There was one that went to say thank you. And the one that went to say thank you is the one that was made whole. So he went from you seeing the effects of his disease to him being completely new because he went back to Jesus to say thank you. So I think that is why it's so important to me to say thank you to the members of the committee, to the people on their teams, and to each and every one of you who are sitting here today, and most importantly, the executive team and the board of the Higher Life Foundation. So just in closing, you know, Nelson Mandela said education is the most powerful tool to change the world. But education is not confined to the walls within your classroom or to books or to learning online. Education is knowledge, not ordinary knowledge, but the knowledge that empowers you to do something with your life. The knowledge that becomes a tangible tool that you can use to create your business venture, to impact your neighbor or your community, or to even do extremely well in school. That is what real education is. And that is what has the power to change your life, to change the world, and to change the face of poverty, not only in Africa, but in the globe. And I think as I've grown up, you know, I grew up with some of the speakers that you saw today, amazing, amazing people, the likes of Vellani, the likes of Prince. When I met Prince, he was a history maker who hadn't even finished his O-levels, skipped A-levels, went straight to university. Now he's at Oxford University. But what sets us apart, the people you saw who were speakers, the people who've been mentors, is that we did something with the knowledge that we had. Vellani and I standing here today can tell you many of our family friends who we left behind. They haven't started a business. They don't have a job. They haven't impacted anybody's life. And it's because they didn't do anything with the knowledge that they had. We all received the same thing, and yet you don't see them standing here today. So I urge you and encourage you, do something with what you've received today. And you know, in closing, I looked at my own education, and it's one thing to be in the classroom, but I really grew to learn and to appreciate the education that I received at home from my parents and from our friends. You know, when you have parents who've achieved so much, your life is not ordinary. You get to see their everyday disciplines. When they start businesses, you get to see it. EcoCash was a drawing on a serviette in a restaurant. Stewart Bank was an idea. EcoNet was an idea. And we've grown up to see these ideas go from a pencil drawing on a serviette to something incredible. The newly launched business, Kwese TV, was an idea that I brushed off. So do you want to be doing TV? Was EcoNet not enough? But now Kwese has millions of viewers already. And so one thing that I have always wanted to do was to bring the education that I receive at home to you. And that was the purpose of Innovate, Elevate Youth Conference. You're hearing
from the next generation's presidents, people like Ronak at such a young age. You don't get that every day. That is somebody you won't be able to contact in 10 years' time, but you've had the opportunity to meet them today. So welcome to the first Innovate, Elevate Youth Conference. It is the first of many, and I hope to see you again next year.
Very inspirational. And just a few announcements to get us underway. There is one track that was postponed from yesterday that we will need to catch up on soon after this, and that is track number 3, Opportunities for Youths, Post-High School and Undergraduate, so nationally, regionally, internationally. Mr. Prince Abudu will be facilitating that track in the Jubilee Hall, so you don't want to miss that. And it's not over until it's over. We would like to know also how this event has been. So please, at 5 p.m., we will have a feedback form that will be activated on the Innovate, Elevate Youth Conference website. There will be a tab on your top menu that will be written feedback. Please fill in and complete and give us a feedback. We would like to see where we can improve and what we can do better for the next Innovate, Elevate Youth Conferences to come. Let's give another round of applause to Ms. Tanya Masiwa for such a good, delivering, inspirational speech. From myself, Tichati Munyaradzi, your host, out.
World's greatest. World's greatest. I am a mountain